Hello, everyone. This is Elena Mosaner. This is Mind Over Matter. And today I'm going to be talking to Oliver Amorowson, who is a designer in the tech industry. And he's also a town and district councillor for the Green Party, or as they say in UK, party in the UK. So welcome, Oliver.
Thank you. Hi. Nice to meet you.
Hi. So first of all, I guess we have to say, okay, we have to let our audience know this is the first time you and I ever meeting and talking, right?
Yeah, we've had various conversations on Facebook in the past and interactions, but yeah, this is the first Zoom or anything. So
I want to thank you for being courageous and open to do this with me, because the whole idea for the podcast came out about, I would say, a month and a half ago, and the story is very unique and interesting. You probably know who Brian Rose is, right? Who was running for mayor of London.
Yes. Okay.
So basically, I was never a big fan, but I like studying people and understanding characters. And he came about on Rebel Wisdom. David Fuller was talking about him doing a piece. Have you seen that?
I have. Yeah, he's been quite critical of Brian Rose. Yeah,
it's very interesting. So I watched it. I'm like, my gosh, somebody's being also intuitive and critical. They see what I saw back then. Let me study more. So as I started researching, let me just really trace Brian Rose's story. I wanted to understand what happened. Why was there such an interesting fall and rise, or whatever it is that as they were seeing. And then I'm watching him do his work, and then all of a sudden these commercials are coming up, promoting him, and all all the testimonials. I took his course, which is I don't know, $3,000-$5,000 course, and now I have a podcast. And I'm like, wait, you paid so much money to do a podcast? I can do it right now. And this is it. And I started doing a podcast.
Do you know, I actually signed up, I didn't sign up for the course, but I did the kind of commercial masterclass that he gave for free, like the free part of it, and linked through to that, and sort of got invited to the Facebook group and everything. And then he had some confusing pricing, and he was saying it's $200, and then suddenly it was like $2,000. It was like, whoa, what's going on? So yeah, it was quite shady. And yeah, I got out, and I had the same feelings previously about him, but I was sort of giving him the benefit of the doubt. This was before the whole David Icke controversy. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and I've enjoyed Rebel Wisdom's explorations, speaking to his ex-partner, the guy who he started,
Nick Gabriel.
That's it. Yeah, Nick Gabriel. So yeah, that's been quite a revelation.
It is quite a revelation, and from there you just wanted to watch where he's going to go, because according to David Fuller, he calls him a grift. Yes,
grifter. Yeah, he's lost so much credibility. Yeah,
we'll see where he goes. And on the one hand, I'm like, I really wish the best for everybody. I want people to learn their lessons. If they fail, I want them to get up and keep going. So hopefully there's going to be some turn in his life, that he'll turn things around. But
well, it seemed like he had it early on. In those early episodes, he seemed really interested in a wide variety of people, and the people he was interviewing were really interesting, like Peter Joseph from the Zeitgeist movement, and Jacques Fresco, the late Jacques Fresco. He died recently at like 101, and he designed all these future cities.
Interesting.
And he was really getting some good people in.
And Gabor Mate, Gabor Mate is a fascinating person.
Even Neil deGrasse Tyson was on.
Yeah.
So like
a lot of credible people, and he's very good. He's a good talker. He does remind me, of some other American political leaders a little bit, former leaders, especially in the sense of like he's excited. He's good at connecting. He's good at connecting with people. Like you see him like being so genuine and kind, to the point that when I started searching and researching about him, because I wanted to understand what happened, why is there, Rebel Wisdom was talking about him, his partner's coming out. I'm like, what was it about him? And then I saw that, that there's a meeting with Penna, who possibly triggered him back to his, we can call it a shadow, wanting the,
well, yeah.
Yeah.
His
So
banking history. Yeah.
exactly. So it's possibly something like that has happened. But like a lot of people are saying that are talking about him, that there are some good things that have come out for them in these courses because they met each other, then there's a lot of positive. And for me, the positive is that I actually started a podcast without taking a course with him. So in a sense, thank you. That situation worked out for me. That situation meaning watching and observing what's happening online. So
nice.
Yeah, here I am. And I contacted you, Oliver, because this is my podcast number 5. So you're the 5th person. I contacted you because I'm very much interested in development. I'm interested in spiral dynamics. And when I first discovered spiral dynamics, as you say, one of the few developmental models, and that's how we're going to talk about it. I agree. There's so much happened for me. I wanted to learn more. I felt like I wanted to talk about it, but nobody knew about it around me. And it felt like I need to connect. I need to talk about that. And so I found that group online on Facebook, Spiral Dynamics Integral, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where I met you, right?
Yeah, I think it probably was. Yeah, because I think I sort of recognized you as someone who was, who had recently found it, just as I had, really. And I had done all this reading, and it seemed like I had some things that I knew maybe a little bit more than you, and I was like passing this information on, the books I'd read and that. And so it's when you find out about spiral dynamics, I find that people get very enthusiastic. I did, yeah. and you were like super enthusiastic, so I felt that, and yeah, just wanted to like you say, wanted to connect with it and communicate.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, how did you discover spiral dynamics?
So basically through social media. I have a friend based in San Francisco who had been in a group. So I mentioned the Zeitgeist movement earlier. So I'd previously been interested in that and part of the group, and I'd made a few friends through that online. And he had been putting links in the groups and on his personal page to this developmental theory, and like talking about this and saying how important it was. And people kind of ignore it because it sounds quite alien when you hear about it for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think this must have been maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I had looked at it a few times and thought that sounds maybe a bit dodgy. Maybe, I don't know, I didn't quite believe it. And maybe I wasn't ready to receive the information, we'll talk about that later, like how you can,
readiness for it. It's like for ayahuasca, almost very similar. Yeah. We'll talk about it.
So yeah, and then one day I just sort of followed up on one of his links. I think he was evangelizing about it again, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna look at it. And then so it was maybe 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago that I
it's also fairly recent. Yeah. And then you finally looked into it. What happened?
There's been maybe a couple of times in my life where you discover something new and you just like really excited about it, and you end up staying up late and just, watching videos and ordering all the books about it. So it was like that, and of course there's all these routes you can take when you find out about spiral dynamics. You look at the history of it, you look about how it came about, you look at how it developed with a guy called Ken Wilber, an American philosopher who sort of took it on and developed it even more, and controversially developed it even more, and made a whole sort of worldview out of this these theories. And you just, and then you start, the great thing is when you start to see applications in your life, and you
Yes,
start to
that's it.
see,
Mhm.
you start to see the truth of the theory sort of playing out, you know, and you can relate it to people in your life. So I don't know what level of knowledge you think your audience might have about it, because we're probably being quite abstract at the
Yeah.
moment talking about it.
Yeah, and even just the way you talk about it, it's also, I think for some people it may create some sort of curiosity, you know, just because it's genuine sharing. And I think some people know what spiral dynamics is because I already talked about it with a few guests. If and I always ask someone who knows spiral dynamics, how would you just define it in your own words, in literally 30 seconds to a minute? How would you define it to somebody who's watching
Yeah.
first time?
So it's a developmental theory. It's a psychosocial developmental theory, and sometimes it's talked about in terms of being post-Piagetian. So a lot of people are familiar with Piaget,
Yeah.
the child developmentalist. And so Piaget studied children and noticed these stages that they go through up until about age, or teenage years, and so defined these distinct stages. And then a lot of people started to think, well, okay, if children develop that way, then what happens to adults? We just assume that, like, once you're 18, you've developed and you're an adult suddenly, and you know nothing changes. But so spiral dynamics is one of the post-Piagetian developmental models that takes up from where Piaget left off, and tries to include adult development in that. So that's what makes it distinct, really. It's about adult development as well as children development, but also it's not just about personal development, it's about cultural development as well. So
that's an interesting point that you say post Piaget. How do you say Piagetian?
Piagetian, yeah.
Piagetian,
Something like that.
yeah, Piagetian. Yeah, that's, I've never heard that actually. That's very interesting because we know that Jordan Peterson is very much into Piaget. I never heard Jordan Peterson talk about spiral dynamics for some reason. Have you heard of him? Have him talk about it?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think he must now be aware of it because of all the sort of
media and conversations.
Like the Rebel Wisdom guys that they've been interviewing. You know, David Fuller became friends with Peterson essentially, and has since like made various critical comments about him. But I would imagine that he must be aware about it now.
I'm pretty sure he must be aware of it. It's just whenever I hear him talk about these stages or memes or any, you know, all, you know, starting from beige to yellow or the tears or being multi perspective, like he doesn't quite talk about it. Although a lot of view of him online is through that lens, right? Like you said, David Fuller has been really applying that, including Ken Wilber. So that's what it is. So thank you for your explanation and your view of spiral dynamics. I also see it as a map. For me, it has become a map. When I discovered it, I was like, now I understand where I have been and where I need to go. And I understood where I was in my development at that moment, and where I was when I first came to America. Also, to me, it really became important because I was born in the Soviet Union, you know, and I was hypnotized by the society and culture of that, you know, regime and you know, culture in a sense. So, and I remember when I came to America, how a lot of concepts and beliefs were kind of breaking up for me, and how from one society coming here, my gravitation was towards the orange, obviously. So I understood where some of the problems were in my own development and how the orange has, thankfully, was not the only way. And I discovered that there are other ways to think and believe about the world, which was the green meme, you know. And that was good for me to see where to go, how to correct my thinking and my beliefs, and where to go, you know. So it was a fascinating roadmap, and like you said, I began to understand people around me. Like you said, you saw people according to, their beliefs and their value
Mhm.
systems, right? So
Yeah.
that was very interesting. And I think also relating to people has become different but easier because you understand
Yeah.
what people are.
Yeah. I think this is one of the powers of having any kind of developmental model in your operating system is mediation. I think it just helps you mediate between different groups. I guess we should say something about what the stages are, maybe.
Yes, let's
Yeah.
let's say what the stages are. So we have
Let's see if we can remember them, right?
so we have the beige, which is the first one, right?
So yeah, it's worth saying then. So when spiral dynamics was conceived of, they didn't have colors. So Claire Graves had very convoluted names for them for each stage. I think he used a number and a letter, and then Don Beck came along and sort of gave it the name of spiral dynamics and made the colors. So just to make it more accessible and easier to translate. So yeah, we start with beige color, which is correlates to culturally, it correlates to so early man, I guess.
Yeah.
Early humans. Culturally, it relates to that, and then personally, it relates to how a baby might perceive the world. It's all about survival.
Yeah.
And then
Purple.
purple
Yeah.
is next. Yeah, so purple. So culturally, purple is about moving from a survival instinct type of worldview to a
Community.
tribal,
Yeah.
coming together in slightly larger communities, family and community. And personally, again, the baby becomes aware of their
Their
family and the
surroundings.
people
Yeah.
around them, and they start to recognize their tribe. So the next stage
And it's
is,
kind of when Oliver is talking about it, we always go in a spiral. So meaning like here's the beige here, and then here we're going into purple. Then from purple, the next one, red, back to the same side but above beige. And it looks like whatever's, let's say on the left side, if you look at spiral dynamics, left is always individual, like me oriented, and the right side is always others, community oriented. So it's always like a pendulum from me to us, me us, me us. But every stage as we go up, it becomes different. So after the purple, after the community purple, we go where into?
We go into a more singular me orientated stage. Red. So red is people developing out of the tribal phase and into a kind of conquering phase where they want to conquer other tribes, perhaps. And so people like, Alexander the Great, or the great conquerors of history.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah, Genghis Khan. But also in red can exist in sort of current societies, or slightly historical societies. An example that's often given is mafia. So mafia, kind of might makes right, is the buzzword for red. And personally, it's about harnessing your personal power, and
which is important, right? All stages are important.
Yeah, also worth saying. Yeah, so it's not that we leave these stages behind. As we progress, we transcend and include in Wilber's terminology. We include part of the previous stage. And it's worth also mentioning that people talk about a healthy version of a stage and a potentially unhealthy version of the stage. So yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about red, it's often seen as like, the bad stage, because it's all about, Genghis Khan, but actually.
But it's the development of me, and I'm able to do things. Let's say you are you moved into the purple, and you're connected with your community, and it's about, you know, making beads for each other and giving, like giving things to each other and caring for each other. But then you need to grow as a community, right? And there's going to be that one or two, a few people that's going to say, you know what, I know how to lead us into a better place. So
Yeah.
that's somebody with that red kind of value meme system.
Yeah.
And obviously what's going to happen in that moment, they're going to think, you know what, I'm a little bit above here. I know what's going on there. They don't really know, but I know what's up. I'm going to
Yeah.
lead them there, and I know how to get water. Therefore, maybe the shadow aspect would be, you know, I'm better. I know more, and it
Yeah.
can reflect negatively, right?
I'm
In
bigger
shadow.
physically as well. I think initially,
Exactly.
you know, it was possibly, I often think of it as quite a masculine stage, but I guess there must be a feminine aspect to it as well. But yeah, you know, the might makes right, and the power god dynamic, all about sort of dominance, really, dominance
Yeah.
over other people. But that would be the unhealthy aspect of it, where it becomes that kind of bloodshed. But nowadays people talk about the healthy aspect of it being that harnessing your emotions and your anger and your personal power to just to do things in the world, to manifest
And that's
things in the world.
probably as you go up to yellow, which we'll get there. This is where you truly really begin to harness that without thinking I'm better than others or I'm above others, right? But
Yeah.
in the red stage, this is the likelihood for that kind of thought to occur, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So from red, we move to blue,
To blue. Yeah.
back to the other side, which is above
The
purple.
Yeah, so the communitarian, the we side again.
Yeah.
And so at this point, culturally, the society is starting to get a handle on these wayward power gods, and the society starts to become more rule based,
Mm-hmm.
and orderly, and
Mm-hmm.
hierarchical, and traditional. Traditional is often used as the sort of key word for this stage. I think it was
Interesting.
also,
Like you mentioned the word hierarchical, because from red, right, you move up to the blue, and this is
mm,
where it kind of develops naturally into that progression, right?
mm,
Like where someone's bigger, someone has more knowledge, the other one is looking up to that, to him or her, oftentimes him back then, right, more masculine, and you look up to that person and you want to be like them, so you move up the rank, you know, you follow their orders in a sense, so it becomes this little bit of like a hierarchy. You learn from them because they may have the superior knowledge or something like that.
yeah,
church
yeah.
church is an example, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I think, yeah, I think blue is often correlated with like the axial age, and the Abrahamic religions, and the establishment of church and state, and
No, I
just
have
sort
a
of the,
question. If it
mm,
is, I know it's often associated with Abrahamic religions, church, or maybe even, well, let's say Abrahamic, yes, like Christianity or Islam. But what about atheism in Soviet Union? Because for some reason I thought it was in the blue stage.
mm. Yeah, that's interesting. So I mean, I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't know how, Don Beck or Claire Graves would rationalize that.
yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of people in the spiral dynamics community who have an opinion on that.
Yeah.
But I guess I would say it could be one of two things. It could be that actually Soviet Union possibly, and this is where we get to some of the problems with spiral dynamics, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it could be that the Soviet Union, as we know it, came of age, or has been in a global culture where the Enlightenment exists, where science exists, and so therefore it's not existing in a bubble. So that those movements are going to have an influence, even though the structural society might remain at a more blue stage. It
Mhm.
might just by osmosis get Enlightenment perspectives to some degree.
But
Or it
also,
might,
sorry?
I was going to say, or it might be just that they're at traditional stage, at blue stage, but it just hasn't, for whatever reason, the religious side of it hasn't taken a hold. And I'm not too sure about the history of religion in the Soviet Union. You can probably elaborate a lot more on that.
It's interesting to me to say that, you know, obviously during the Soviet Union, they were burning churches. It was not allowed. When it collapsed, then, you know, Christianity started coming, and Buddhism and all sorts of spiritual things. But churches sort of did exist. They still, they're beautiful constructions. They did exist, and they're very historical. I think that there is a religious aspect to Soviet Union system, in the sense that people were looking at Lenin, who was the leader, right, of communism. They looked at him as almost like a god in a sense, or Stalin. They would have their pictures at home, you know, displayed in the living room. Lenin was in the tomb, in the mausoleum on the Red Square. So, and we, as you know, kids, I remember wearing something on my chest, like a little, I don't know how you call that in English, I'm forgetting the word, but with his picture, basically. Yeah, it's a little sign with his picture. So he was considered as that kind of person. So I think, like we know that spiral dynamics is not perfect. Of course, there are things. It's not like absolute 100%, you know, science. It's a theory, and we can kind of color things in some certain ways and say that, yes, intuitively, like understanding and knowing spiral dynamics, I would say Soviet Union communism is somewhat in the blue side.
Well, this is an interesting angle. So what you can say is that perhaps, you know, the people who conceived of these societal systems may have been at a higher stage, but it's when it's in the implementation where they bring these insights to the wider public, to the whole society, and the society's center of gravity is at a lower stage, then that plays out in a more basic way. So they might have had these higher, the concept of communism and Leninism might have come from a higher stage in the individuals, but when pasted onto the society, you know, the people weren't ready to take up the ideas exactly.
Okay.
So it becomes more of a kind of secular religion at a blue stage society. So.
Very interesting. Yeah, because this it's very similarly, the blue develops then into the, not the orange, but higher, the one that's above it, which is green, which we'll talk about, right? So, okay, so then after blue, we move into this orange. This is where I've arrived to America. This is what I was studying about America, that it's about individualism, it's about success, it's about achievement, it's about money. And this was very luring to me in a way, you know, especially coming from not having many things growing up in the Soviet Union. So we always looked at America as a country that, you know, it was a free country. You can do a lot of things. There's so much opportunity. So that's the way I've really experienced this full-blown orange meme in a sense. But then it became tiring. It became so tiring to me, psychologically tiring, because I felt like, but I'm more than that. I'm more than my degrees. I'm more than that. Why do people ask me all the time in New York, what do you do and where do you live? You know, like it was really taking up a lot of energy, and this is where I kind of started to rebel a little bit against that, you know. But that's the orange meme, right?
So orange is moving back to an individual mindset. So you're coming out of the traditional blue, the sort of the restrictions of living in that sort of society, and so culturally a society starts to explore aspects of sort of libertarianism, and, you know, focus on the individual, and, you know, the individual should be free, and that's where
entrepreneurism, right?
Absolutely. And so you can, you know, this is starting to become familiar to us, right? You know, we're somewhat familiar with traditional societies these days. There are still some in the world, but we're very familiar with what we would now term as the modern society. Orange is translatable to modern.
Yeah.
So modern society. It's also we were talking about the Enlightenment earlier. It's also where scientific ideas and the Enlightenment ideas start to come online. So
Sam Harris becoming popular.
Yeah. So you could say that Orange came about, was kickstarted by the Enlightenment, and before that the Renaissance. So that was the start of scientific thinking and rational thought.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's another good side of that's Orange. It's where I personally have become familiar with these people like Christopher Hitchens back then when he was alive. Sam Harris. I was like fascinated with their lectures and debates. It was so interesting. To me, it felt so brand new. So fresh.
So new atheism,
atheism,
is very Orange. New atheism.
But then we could say that even Sam Harris isn't necessarily all orange right now. He moved a lot into green, I would say.
Well, I mean, David, one of the sort of popular spiral dynamic YouTubers who we were both familiar with, David Long, he actually says that Sam Harris might be the most yellow public intellectual that we have. Like, he's not fully there. Because he's not fully self-aware of being such. But I think he definitely espouses that kind of that multi-perspectival view, which we'll get to. So
and it's really fascinating. I've been listening to his podcast more and more lately again. So here we go. That's Orange. And lots of fresh thinking, lots of doubting all this archaic, religious old, religious Christianity and sort of beliefs, and moving into individualism and success is important. I remember when I first joined Spiral Dynamics in Techno, I asked the first question. I was just like, okay, who is Kim Kardashian? Who is this? Who is that? Who are these people? Like, are they orange? Like, I really wanted to understand. And, I thought that I was kind of right on that. I thought Kim Kardashian was more in the orange meme.
Yeah. Well, at least her public persona. Maybe she's a turquoise genius, but we don't know.
You're right. And I'm glad you said that, because I've been looking at her and I'm like, she's fascinating. And sometimes I sense this goddess archetype in her, She's some sort of connector. She is, yes, it's success. Yes, she's selling us her makeup and she has lots of followers, and so do her sisters on her coattails in a sense. But, there's something about her and just the way she speaks. I read an article about her.
I don't think I've ever heard her speak.
No, I've watched here and there. And she's getting into politics and all that, but I heard somebody wrote an article about her where they say, when you're around Kim Kardashian, you feel like everything is going to be okay. So we don't know. We really don't know. But
I don't want to go on record as saying that Kim Kardashian is turquoise, by the way. So,
but she's what? Turquoise?
Turquoise.
No. It was a kind of like a joke. So we don't know. We see some orange kind of tendencies there, but we don't know. We don't know for sure. So we can't.
And worth saying as well that what we're doing there is slipping into the problem of calling people colors. So people say, the guys who teach this stuff say it isn't that people are at a stage, it's that their behavior within them, they express behaviors or views that are from stages. So you can have your personality spread over maybe 2 or 3 stages, different parts of you.
I like that.
Different stages. So just worth saying that this isn't about categorizing people and sort of denigrating people and saying you're blue, you're orange. It's about saying that behavior that you just did, or that song that you heard, or that idea is a blue idea. It's an orange idea. Yeah.
I like that. Thanks for bringing that up, Oliver. It's important not to categorize people as this and this color, but rather to say their behavior or view is exhibiting the value of an orange meme, for example, right?
Yeah.
We can say that. That's a very good point. So where are we going after orange? That's an interesting stage.
Yeah.
Green.
So what do we see? Just worth backtracking to blue, saying that it's one of the words that denotes it is ethnocentric, right? So you're concerned with your country and you don't like foreigners, basically. So with orange, it's the beginning of a global worldview. You start to see yourself as a global citizen, even though, you know, there is still tension. With orange, yeah. It's the first. It's the first global. It's the first time global comes online. However, it's not fully embraced because you're still restrained by, you know, the dynamics of commerce and the state and all of that sort of ideology that is still sort of trying to get out of traditionalism. But the next stage is green. And that is where you start to critique everything about modern society.
Yeah.
And this is the postmodern stage. So you're starting to see all the problems with postmodern society, with modern society. And so you recognize that there is certain aspects of like what Marx was saying, which was like the, you know, the alienation of commerce and capitalism. You notice how the environment is being degraded, and so we can say that postmodern society came about really in the 60s with the green movements, with the environmental movements, and just that you can recognize it by people who are just critical of society, and this meme, as we call all the stages, this meme, as you know, I recognize this strongly in myself from like during my, well, really starting in my teens, but then lasting all the way until, you know, maybe mid-30s.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, it started early for you.
I think it did, and this is a weird thing, and this is why the map isn't the territory, right? You know,
Exactly.
it's like, so. But I was, and this is where, so we can introduce another model at the moment. So we can start to talk about metamodernism. So I don't want to go into it right now, but so yeah.
But it looks like it will answer this problem where
it does, right?
Thank you. Reality. Yes. So there is that very core problem where sometimes I ask myself, okay, so you just mentioned that from 13 you're already feeling the values that are resembling the green meme, right? Postmodern.
Yeah.
To me, it came a lot later. but what's interesting is that some people seem to be born with it, right? Like Greta from Norway, right? And she may not have gone through all the previous stages, being, you know, and experienced any of those values per se. Maybe she was born like that. That's not the question. Like then some people are born this way. They don't go through these stages. I don't have an answer for that through biodynamics. Right?
Or at least they get to stages very quickly, and you can, with its biodynamics framework, you can question it and say, how is that happening? So I remember being like 13 and talking to my friend about growing up and getting a job, and just thinking, oh, it's all just a farce. And that's what I said to him. I said, oh, it's all a farce, you know, the life that's set out before us is just a farce, and it's why do we do it? Questioning everything. And this is the start of like a personal postmodern development. Because many people you will meet, people your audience will have met, or maybe even they just don't question society like that. Many people are just modern, and they want to get a job and, you know, have a family and just die peacefully and have a good retirement and all of that. So, and of course we all do. Even
Yeah.
if you're a postmodern, you know, you still got those limitations, those human limitations, and the societal limitations of living in a commercial capitalist society. You know,
Yeah.
we still have that society. So
Or
so
not
even
just get a job, or for some folks it could be, you know, inherit the money, or, you know, use that money to build another business in another business and be an
mm,
entrepreneur and be super successful, and then sell those products and make a lot of money and travel, you know.
yeah, it's just the way things are done right now, right? So we can certainly say that the a large part of certainly American society, but European society as well, is very modern and is less questioning. But we can see also, you know, with you know, the conversations that are in society at the moment around Black Lives Matter,
Yeah.
and you know,
Me Too
LBG,
movement, Black Lives
yeah, Me
Matter.
Too,
Yeah.
LBGTQ. Those conversations are very much the postmodern
Yeah.
sections of society arguing with the modern aspects and also the traditional aspects of society. So
There's
there's
a lot
a
of cultural war around it. That's very,
cultural wars. Yeah, I wasn't going to use the term because it might not be familiar to people, but
yeah.
yeah, the culture wars. So there's a spiral dynamics or an integral philosopher, I forget his name, who describes it as being stretched out. Society is stretched out developmentally at the moment. So there's still a huge base of traditional people in the West, in
Mhm.
America especially. Then like you've got the you know, the financial aspects and the aspirational parts of society, and then you've also got the green postmodern aspects and they're all kind of stretched out. Society's stretched out, and they're all kind of fighting.
Flashing, and especially
Yeah.
because there's so much frustration, and I can relate to it on an individual level. When I lived in New York, when I was pursuing myself, my degrees, my work, my success, I would meet every now and then with people who talked about oceans or talked about green, you know, the recycling, and I'm like, this is just like, it's one of those people, you know. There it was a moment like that in my life when I literally look at them like, okay, this is just not for me, it's too much. And on top of all that, they just keep teaching me, they're being arrogant, like, who, like, I don't want to feel this way, like I'm a, you know, like you're a child,
Yeah,
almost like they do. Who are
yeah,
they? I have my life.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I can understand, this is not where I am right now, this is where I used to be, but I can understand how the society is relating to these things very similarly, right? When the
Mm,
green movement, or you know, whatever the movements and groups are coming up from that postmodern society, how
mm,
they are becoming frustrated, like a frustrated parent almost, with
mm,
with a child, with a teenager, and they just don't know
mm.
what to do. And so
Yeah,
there's a lot of that clash that is happening.
yeah. So this really speaks to an aspect of spiral dynamics, which says that all the stages up to green are known as first tier.
Yep.
They're all in the first tier of stages, and that means that they are not aware of development. They're not aware that there are these stages, and so they're just at war with all of them. All the first tier stages just kind of don't like each other. And you might ask, well, how does that work when, you know, people progress through these stages? Do you just like, how do you go from like one worldview to another worldview? And so psychologically, they say this happens because you react against, you literally have these epiphanies during your life, and you're speaking so honestly about them now, you know, where you really believe these things and you're annoyed by certain people, and then, you know, you mature and relax into a new way of
Mhm.
being, and step away from the previous one. There
Yeah.
tends to be this so when, for example, when people move into green, they might become an activist because they're so passionately
Yeah.
trying to push themselves away from orange.
Yeah.
um, And so there's that dynamic of it's eventually you transcend and include, but initially when you're in the sort of transition phase, you try and push away from the previous stage.
Yeah, but I also wonder, how is it possible that some people are somewhat lost and they're just trying to find something, and maybe they go into one of the green movements, and say, let me just be with that and just fight for something, so that's maybe orange and kind of
Yeah.
behavior in me right now, kind of
Well,
rebelling against.
yeah, sure. Well, absolutely. I mean, so it's worth saying green is, we're swinging back into a we stage, into a communal stage again. So yeah, it can get tribal,
Yeah.
and people want to find their tribe, and arguably, the conversation in integral and spiral dynamic circles is that this is where like identitarian politics is coming from. How we all want to support the struggles of minorities and people who with different sexual persuasions, but there's the complaint that at Green you get people really taking these missions to heart, and
It's almost like militant, becoming
yeah,
militant.
becoming very tribal,
Mm-hmm.
and even like a kind of regression back into
Exactly.
blue, where there's like you just feel it so strongly, and
Yeah, and that's probably the unhealthy representation of it. Something I remember, actually, one of
yeah,
the recent podcasts I watched with David Fuller and Jonathan Rawson, I think his name is.
yes, yeah,
And it was very good, where he mentioned the one of the ideologies, sort of the green meme, where you say, there are no truths, and we can agree with that, right? There's no truths, or even like the idea that with the gender, like but talking about gender,
it's a social construct, right?
yeah, social construct, exactly. So maybe I feel like, masculine, I'm feminine today, I have nothing, and maybe I'm not exhibiting any of those things today, and it feels good, not even though I have a XY chromosome and woman body, right? So it's like the truth, that there is no truth. That's what they believe in, and yet when it goes into the unhealthy form, that's the truth, right? So there's no
Yeah.
truth, but that's truth. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
kind of
true
like,
that there is no truth. Yeah, so they call it the performative contradiction
right.
of
So
Green.
that's the unhealthy sort of side of that green, but it is so important. We don't want to get too confusing to our audience about these things, but it is so important to go through these stages. And before you go to the second tier, which we'll talk about, you can't just jump from orange to yellow. It's impossible. You have to
Right.
swim in the green and truly, fully process and understand it,
Yeah. So this is
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I always marvel really at how, because you can imagine like someone who really embodies orange, like an entrepreneur, a banker who's all about aspiration and possessions and
Brian Rose.
materialism and primrose.
Maybe exhibiting some of that.
Maybe, exactly, yeah.
Possibly.
Someone who's really taken on board that, the modern meme, what they would think of like a hippie who's green and is an environmentalist and is anti-capitalist and is non-binary and is black and is all of these things. What they're just worlds apart, and yet somehow, if that banker or that entrepreneur is open to it, then that is the path that they're going to take. They're going to take on at least some of those ideals, and they're going to start to critique their own lifestyle. And so that's the kind of transformations that we're talking about, and that's why it's so difficult at first tier, because people are so far apart, even though it's the next stage. So
very, very interesting. Yeah. And to bring back to this idea, and maybe some people can relate to it, when you're fully in the orange, like at least for me, the idea of a green was, it's not for me. Maybe somehow it's not the time, or it's for others to think about. It's not for me to deal with. I have my life to think about. I need to earn income. I need to finish this education. I want to be successful. Yeah, I was really concerned with my own achievement. Like I said earlier, how it just became too heavy for me. It's because it truly isn't about that. Like, for instance, I'm really enjoying talking to you, and it came up to me already a few times during our conversation. And I was wondering, like, I'm thinking on different levels, kind of chaotic. Like, I was talking with this woman about the difference between men and women. I said, you know, Jordan Peterson says women are chaotic and men are orderly. And I said to her, you know, chaos, some people may say it's negative. And she's like, no, as a woman, I'm talking to you right now, and I'm like thinking about this picture behind you, wondering how it might look like in my house, looking at the time and thinking when it will end. That's chaos in a sense. So with that said, I want to say that throughout the conversation, as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking already 5 times how I enjoy talking to you. And why? Because you don't have anything to promote, not like you're not promoting a book, you're not promoting anything, you don't have anything to sell. And the conversation is easy and genuine, and there's nothing in the background, because times to time you talk to people that have something, the business or book, and it's always coming back to it, which is fine. I'm okay with that. It's perfectly fine. But also, when someone doesn't have any of these things, it's just like it's so much more real. And at the same time, maybe you are so turquoise, as you might say, turquoise, that you have the book somewhere or you have something somewhere, but at that point it doesn't matter. People listen to us and then they'll Google you and they'll find out who you are. Yeah, does it make sense?
Well, thank you for suggesting I might be turquoise, but I don't like to diagnose myself. But yeah, it's true. I am not a author or a entrepreneur, although some aspects of me would like to be. Yeah, I am talking from a completely sort of amateur perspective here, and yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation as well. But yeah, it's interesting because yeah, you often, I listen to podcasts, and you can always tell when the person being interviewed is like a scientist or something, and or just someone less interested in aspiration, and is coming from a genuine space, yeah, and somewhere
Yeah,
less promotional,
exactly. Even if the person may be an author or filmmaker or has produced certain things, but they come from that point of view where it's just we're having a conversation. That's what's important to people. So here we go. That's the green meme that we just discussed moments ago. Hopefully people have an idea of what it is. It is the time where you actually think more about the oceans, and actually truly you think more about recycling and things like that. I started feeling guilty, about
yeah,
packages and
yeah,
plastic, and
yeah,
I'm just looking at the garbage can. I'm like, why are they? And you know what? California is supposed to be really onto those things, but I lived in Italy for 1 year, and there it's much more strict. You have 5 different bins, you recycle, and everybody thinks that there's a lot of green movement in California, but for some reason I'd like to research and understand more where all the garbage goes, because there's recycling isn't the same as it is in Europe.
yeah. Some of the stats I hear are quite worrying, yeah, about how only a small percentage of what's put in the recycling is actually recycled, but it's difficult to get solid figures on that, because you can imagine it's very controversial.
Let's talk about yellow, because we're running out of time. There's so much more
Oh
to talk
wow.
about. We're gonna have to try
Okay.
again. So let's talk
Okay.
about yellow for a little bit.
Yeah. So yellow is the first stage of second tier. And the originator of spiral dynamics, Claire W. Graves, described this as humanity's momentous leap, like a great transition for individuals and for society. And basically, it sounds kind of grandiose, but basically yellow is what we're doing now. We're talking about all the stages where we're saying what's good and what's bad about them. We're recognizing them. We see them. We're not judging them so much. We're trying to trying to make them healthy. And so a lot of people say that you know, there's not that much yellow in the world. Not, you know, in terms of the global population, there's maybe 3 to 5% of people who kind of realize this kind of dynamic that is at this the spiral dynamic, the dynamic of all of the aspects of society. And yeah, I definitely recall a time, maybe starting from age 36, maybe six or so years ago, where I was just starting to notice that you start to recognize the people who you chime with, and that there are these differences, and you really start to feel those, oh, that person's sort of like that, and that person's sort of like that, and I like those people, but they're a bit too extreme, and like that person is rigid and traditional, and they are, you know, they're not even sort of like this person yet. So you start to see that, but there's no map. And like you said, spiral dynamics is the map, and it's not a perfect map, but it really shows you these archetypes almost of society, these or stereotypes. So yellow is really about systemic thinking, and first of all, seeing the system of society itself, seeing your own development, understanding about development. And that, just like I said, I think one of the powers of it is mediation, and you can apply it to your life.
Yeah.
And you can see, like, people in your family who you maybe haven't got on with, you can start to appreciate their perspective even more when you understand that, okay, they don't think like that because they're just not they're not receiving the meme that you want them to. You're in a privileged position for whatever reason, because you're able to see these extra parts of culture, extra parts of society. So yeah, I have this with, you know, various family members and people in my life, and if someone has a large part of them that is traditional, then previously, you know, I've got into arguments with them and rows, and like really sort of not understood them. Just, you're thinking, why do you think like that? But if you can just see that there's this progression, and maybe some people still holding on to, you know, previous, let's say, meme plexes, you can just sort of let it fly and just get on with them, and just realize that what's important is, you know, you know, just harmony and conviviality in your life, no matter if you have different opinions with people. So that's how it's really helped me,
And
get on
as
with
we
people.
talk, thank you. So you have that behavior exhibiting the yellow V meme system. I can see that. And I'd like to think of myself having those attributes myself. Of course, you know, I'm not gonna say that this is where I am in this stage of development, but I'd like to have, this is something that I really enjoy, I'd like to have. And one of the qualities of that stage is being multi-perspective. And to me, this is really a core quality. I cherish that quality, and I know that I have it. I know that I have that because it helps me in my practice when I work with clients, in the sense that I can, with their permission, not like verbal permission, but the fact that when they come to me, it's already permission to work with them. So somehow magically I can, for a very quick short time, maybe 15-20 seconds, I can imagine myself being them. It's almost like magical in a sense, you know. It's like Carl Union, I imagine myself being them. And comedians are good at that when they you know, impersonate characters. Actors are very good at that. So I allow myself to be them, and then somehow the information starts flowing, you know. It's like there's a lot of download is happening. And it sounds out there, but it's actually quite some sort of modern science. There's some sort of modern science to it. And it's about really relaxing and knowing that we are all connected. It's like a huge network from mind to mind to mind. And that's also, it helps you, like you said, understand other people, and you don't go too quickly into conflict with others. There may be a trigger, of course, you could be still triggered, but you really try to see their perspective better, you know.
Yeah.
I see their perspective, I see where they come from. And even with my family members, with my husband, you know, that's the best way to really truly communicate. You always try to understand their perspective as opposed to just being in your view and perception. So that's it's a really, really an important quality. And respect. There's a term called spiral wizard, right? I think you become spiral
Yeah,
wizard. I
the
like that
spiral
term.
wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that describes someone who is basically at second tier, who is really concerned with they call it the health of the spiral. So just when they speak with people, they're trying to encourage the healthy side of wherever they're at, and it's okay for people to be wherever they're at, and emphasize the healthy aspects of their level.
Then we have turquoise, right? We have turquoise, and then there's coral. These are the stages that very rarely people talk about much, right?
Yeah.
But I was
So,
thinking maybe, well, we can talk for a few minutes, but I was actually thinking we should probably, you and I should get back together and do another hour. And because there are a few other things that I really want to talk to you about. The
sure, yeah, I'm up
masculine
for
and
that.
feminine, some of the videos that you posted in the past. I really want to discuss those and your view on things. So why don't we just, so we don't break the spiral dynamic, a couple of words on turquoise, and if you know anything about coral, I don't know, and if it's important.
Yeah, I
If
mean, so what I would say is one of my favorite developmental philosophers says that we shouldn't consider turquoise because the societal environmental aspects that need to be in place aren't there yet. We're still battling with the modern postmodern transition. We're starting to see like second tier art and media, but we don't really have many organizations and institutions that are second tier. So really to say that we can talk about turquoise is it does to me feel like we're sort of jumping the gun a bit, and we can infer what it might be, and there are integral philosophers who believe that it's a real thing and that people can be turquoise, but it's usually reserved for sort of very spiritual gurus who those people who can just like diagnose your life and tell you everything that's wrong and what you should believe in.
That's me. Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah, well, maybe.
No.
Yeah, people
But
like people.
Look, I'm wearing sort of turquoise shirt today, a little bit.
Yeah,
It's too dark. Well, you're wearing the green.
Deep teal. Oh yeah, I've got my green on. Yeah, so people like you familiar with like Sadhguru, the guy called so people say he's possibly like turquoise.
He's interesting, very, very interesting. I've listened to his conversations. I only hope that there's so many gurus like him, that kind of like Osho, that situations went a little crazy. I hope it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna go that way.
He seems different to that. He seems different. He seems way more chill than those guys. And
that's nice. Chill is good.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, he did an interview with Matthew McConaughey. I saw it on YouTube. I need to watch that interview.
Oh yeah, I've seen. I haven't watched it.
I want to watch it. Let's continue our conversation. We'll talk about. I really want to talk about art and media from the yellow perspective. It would be interesting to talk about that. I want to talk about feminine and masculine, and some other things. And I also wanted to talk about some of the lessons and learnings that you talked about, being in that from 13 to 30, exhibiting the green values. So I wanted to talk about that, and also a little bit about the group, just a little bit about the group, Spiral Dynamics group, but On
And
the,
also, I would say let's talk about other developmental models
yes,
and the problem with spiral dynamics.
other models and the problem with spiral dynamics. This is it. This is
Yeah.
our next conversation, guys. So stay tuned. I truly enjoyed talking to you once again. It was a delightful conversation and really great to connect with you finally like that in person, but through Zoom.
Yeah, digitally mediated.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for getting in touch and having me on.
Perfect. I'm going to stop here and I'm going to say goodbye to you. Hold on.